Charting the course for the future, what does the next 12 months hold? And Anthony kind of signposted this panel at the beginning of the day when we were talking about what we're going to focus on today and looking at what does 2025 hold, what should we be thinking about as we look forward. And as you know, the Digital Ethics Summit for the last 8 years has kind of bookended the year. We kind of look at, what, particularly in 2024, and we've been talking about it today, it's been really a year of reflection, consolidation, refinement, consideration, particularly following the epiphany, the events of last year in 2023, where large language models and generative AI really went mainstream. So we really want to focus on this panel as we gather together to kind of take stock, but what happens next? What's next? What next breakthroughs and challenges might reshape the digital ethics conversation, and what issues does this community need to think about as we move forward? And I'm absolutely thrilled and very grateful that we've got some amazing people to help us navigate what's next. And I'm not going to hold you to what's next, but we might gather again together next year and find out how we did. So we have on the panel Felicity Birch, Executive Director for Responsible Technology It's a mouthful. Yeah, Technology Adoption Unit, the RTA. So Felicity, great to see you. And virtually we have Professor Luciano Floridi, the founding director of the Digital Ethics Center and professor in cognitive science program at Yale University, and an old friend to the Digital Ethics Summit. I think, like me, he's probably been at every one. So you're the OG, Luciano, so it's great to have you back. Gaia Marcus, who's the director for the Ada Lovelace Institute, joining us not for the first time, but the first time in that role. So brilliant to have you with us. Kathy Baxter, the principal architect in the Responsible AI and Tech for Salesforce. Kathy, brilliant to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time. Jonathan Khalifa, the co-chair of Clifford Chance Tech Group at Clifford Chance. So Jonathan, can we welcome them, everybody?
Thank you.
All right, so this has been a bit of a theme that we've had today, but before we kind of look to the future, let's take stock on where we come from in terms of AI and ethics. What key lessons can we draw from 2024? What have we seen and experienced, and what do we need to perhaps take with us as we go into 2025? And basically, a bit of a cheeky question of, have we got the digital ethics discussion and conversation right this year? So let's start on kind of reflections before we kind of look ahead and get our crystal balls out, as they say. Gaia, can I maybe start with you in terms of, taking stock, what lessons, because you've been new in this role, so been looking at kind of where we are as a community, where we are in this conversation, reflections on where you think taking stock of this year.
Yeah, thank you. So hi, so I've been at Ada for 5 months now, after a longer than expected tour into the UK government that covered the National Data Strategy, government reform, and then more hands-on kind of senior civil service roles in more hands-on data teams. So re-entering this field, my main reflection is that the digital ethics conversation needs to go way beyond the people in this room. Thinking back to 2024, it's been a year rife with narratives around AI driving progress. And yes, I think we've seen an undeniable step change in performance, for example, in general purpose AI models. Interesting news from Amazon today, actually. But to ensure that these technologies actually work for society, we need to ensure that we bring calm, caution, and evidence to hype cycles. Indeed, in 2024, we've seen a real desire for AI to solve long-standing wicked issues in the public sector delivery, but we should really remain sceptical, especially of LLM use in, say, healthcare or policing, given how little we know of their efficacy in the wild, and always ask the right questions. Do these technologies work? Do they work for everyone? And do they work well in context, not just in test conditions, but on the street, in the hospital, on the classroom? And indeed, I think I'd like to call out this year's arms race rhetoric that really reminds us to pay attention to market dynamics. To remember that AI, as you all know, is not just a field of science or data-driven technologies, but also a market in which companies who already exert dominance on both horizontal and vertical levels in our digital markets are now making a play for dominance across the AI stack. And so with all of this in mind, 2024 has really shown us that our efforts to drive the right governance and regulation internationally still require intention. You know, we've got some pivot in the UK's approach, some interesting green shoots in the EU. We're very excited, actually, by the draft codes of practice for general purpose AI that we've seen. The US is anyone's guess, and I'll leave that one to Luciano. And I'm really interested to see what actually happens in terms of governance in the forthcoming AI Action Summit. So for me, next year has to be a year that this conversation moves out of conference side rooms, or indeed conference plenaries, and into the public square. We're seeing this really overwhelming desire and almost moral hope for growth and innovation, like the solution of problems that we haven't managed to solve, but it can't be done at the expense of people. And so what I need, I think, if you take one thing from this, is we need the risks of bias, of discrimination, of bad outcomes to not just be something that you reel off after having extolled potential benefits. The future that's implicitly being built by the tech that we are developing and buying should be on the attention of our policymakers, of the developers and deployers of AI. And we somehow have to bring this into the main square. So on a helpful note, could 2024 be the year that the public deliberation wave in public sector delivery that we've heard about so much about actually comes to fruition? And I'll leave you with that.
Predictions already. Love it.
Sorry.
No. Really interesting, and I'm caught by that kind of, it's been a year of ethics in the wild. We've talked about throughout the day about putting this into practice and what operationalizing this means. So be interesting in people's reflections on that. Luciana, can I come to you? Similar kind of question. What's been your, kind of, if we take a stock take of this year, what key lessons can we draw from this, and have we got the digital ethics conversation discussion? Have we got it right this year? What would you say? Oh, he's laughing. Oh dear.
Well, the hope is to answer yes, that we got it right. I think that I can just maybe add a couple of footnotes to what we just heard. First of all, I think that the conversation has become, to use an appropriate word, a bit asynchronous. We went through a stage of, given also the Digital Ethics Summit, where we were, I'm not saying everybody was on the same page, but it was roughly a general interest in AI principles and how then we moved to the translation of principle into practices. There was some kind of unity of the discourse that made even people, myself included, talk about cottage industry. But if you think of the cottage industry, at least you know how to identify the industry and the cottage. I think now the lines of development have become a little bit more independent. China minds its own business as usual. There are great sort of organizations that are still stuck in the we need to develop AI principles. The UN, the Vatican, nobody of the world. Meanwhile, the more pragmatic corners of the world, the EU, the UK, the US, are trying to figure out how to have a multilateral, transatlantic kind of, let's dance together without being too close but not too far. So first of all, that's the first point, asynchronous conversation that it would be great, as we heard a moment ago, to re-engage with, so that there's a bit of extra harmonization, which we're not seeing at the moment. Maybe the other point, I know we don't have much time, so I'll be short, is what we have seen is the beginning of what might become, but we'll check next year, this AI Act template effect. I know people talk about the Brussels effect. That's the wrong terminology, so please do not use that for reasons that I'm happy to explain. That belongs to the analog world. The digital world does not have a Brussels effect, but it does have, when it comes to regulation, a template effect, for good or bad. I mean, two examples, and I close here. The UK template effect as in reaction to, I don't like this, I don't like that, I'm going to go in a different way. Well, you go in a different way if you have seen someone going that way. You say, well, look, I'm going to take my distance from, for example, in terms of more empowering of local agencies, etc., as opposed to less centralized, and so on. So the template effect doesn't mean I'm going to cut and paste. Or you can go down that road. Maybe we have time to discuss this later. In the United States, at the state level, we see that happen. I mean, literally talking to state-level senators, since I'm here, it's much easier, and being told, yeah, we just take the test, and we see, and we look at what we like, well, we adapt, and what we don't like, we drop it. Well, that's the template. So those two things, I think asynchronous conversation on the one hand, but at the same time, more unifying template effect of the AI Act. So it will be interesting how these two sort of tensions will converge at some point at the end of 2025.
Yeah, thank you, Luciano. Kathy, I saw you nodding along quite a lot to that. What would you add in terms of what you've seen and your reflections on this year and at that time of kind of pause and reflection of where we've come this year? What would you like to add?
Well, for many years, predictive AI really dominated the field, and then in 2023, generative AI exploded on the scene, and then this year, agentic AI exploded. And so as different policymakers are thinking about AI at the model level, we have to think at the systems level. So Salesforce launched Agentforce this year for our customers. And so we very quickly had to shift to think about the entire systems of models. How do we keep them safe? How do we keep humans at the helm and in control of this technology? And I was very happy to see at the International AI Safety Institute Summit in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, they're also shifting their conversations and their thinking from how do we evaluate individual models to how do we think about entire agents. And there's also a shift from moving towards action. So the Paris Summit is being called the Action Summit. And so to Luciano's points of operationalizing, it's like moving that next step. So I think we're seeing this very rapid progression of companies adopting these new kinds of technologies, but also policymakers very quickly then joining these conversations and thinking about what's next.
Jonathan, I'd be interested in your perspective and what you see from your view of the world. Is that shift happening here as well as happening in the US, and what Kathy was saying?
So I work globally on AI projects. I guess one of the things that I would say that I observe globally, possibly less positive than Kathy, is kind of a head in the sand mentality. So certainly so many companies are adopting this technology now, but actually if we take two examples, firstly, cybersecurity. So I think if we were sitting here this time last year, we'd had the first safety summit, and then shortly after Christmas, the NCSC with 14 other regulators posted this very detailed paper about cybersecurity in AI, which was a brilliant piece of work. But actually, if we look at how business is responding to this, and actually what understanding they have of the risks in AI, data poisoning, prompt injection attacks, visibility of how staff are using this, it's at an all-time low. I mean, people are still they're deploying the technology, but they've got this huge additional vulnerability in their tech stacks. And actually the answers that we're getting from vendors, but also when we're speaking to clients, is kind of, we don't know how to deal with this, which for me, I think is not a good place. I think the other thing that I would say in terms of sticking head in the sand a little bit is some of the bigger sort of existential issues around workforce. So, Goldman Sachs have said that 300 million people by 2030 will be put out of work by AI. What are we doing to reskill our people, not just at government level, but as businesses? We employ 10,000 people around the world, and many of the companies in this room will be of similar size. How are we going to think about the stewardship for our employees about, if your role is made redundant by AI, how will we get a new role for you? How will we retrain you? What does it mean for new people we're bringing into the business? And again, clearly this is going to happen much quicker than people think, but there is insufficient planning. And I think there's insufficient planning at government level, and I think there's insufficient planning in companies as well.
Interesting. Felicity, your view of what you've seen, view of the world this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots to agree with what panellists have already said, and I think what what is quite interesting is, we've talked quite a lot over the course of today about how sort of the rubber has hit the road with AI this year. But I think what that's also done is sort of expand the frontier that we're talking about when it comes to AI and digital ethics, because suddenly, it's not just the businesses in this room who are techUK members who are dabbling with these technologies, figuring out how they develop and deploy them. It's my mum and dad. It is. It's everybody, and it's happening in businesses in ways that business leaders don't really know themselves. I was at a dinner with some business leaders earlier this week, and it was a real concern actually about just how much employees are bringing in their own tech. It's if I don't invest in this stuff, they're going to bring in a transcription device to record the meeting because they don't want to type up the meeting notes, and if they move company, they're not going to have to type up the meeting notes. And at the same time, you sort of they were talking about sort of this sense of FOMO, and it's other businesses are investing in this, so I better do it. And I think that there's something to be said by being excited with new technologies, and the way that we learn as humans is playing with things and testing things out. But actually, when something is as potentially risky as AI is, and suddenly a lot more people are now using and exploring this technology, I do think we have to think quite quickly about how we raise the level of understanding in sort of those firms, and indeed within sort of citizens and households, about how to use these technologies safely, and in particular how we favourite theme of responsible tech adoption, but how we assure those technologies in a way that is accessible to businesses, meaningful to consumers as well.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think the board level instinct of saying we need to do this, almost we'll sack the CEO if he doesn't get this right, so we need to do it, but actually not having the solutions, the governance, the understanding of the risk that this creates for the perimeter of your business. And that for me is quite frightening, because and it's right that often the board will delegate this. It will say, it's just go and do it. But actually, what we need is board level understanding and expertise. And if you think of CTOs and CISOs, particularly in Europe, they're often not on boards. And actually they have significant responsibility now for risk and governance in this space, and yet they're not around the boardroom table.
So do you think, just on that point, maybe Jonathan, if I just come back to you, do you think it's the adoption and deployment, and we were talking about diffusion earlier in the morning, that is driving this, then driving that conversation, it's the pace driving it? Or to Luciana's point, do you think that's coming from the kind of the EU Act effect? And where do you think, what do you think will be the most driving force?
For governance, or for organisations going forward? Well, certainly I agree with Luciano that companies are taking the EU AI Act very seriously. I've just come back from Tokyo, not part of Europe. They are talking about this a lot, and they're talking about it in the US. I noted just last week, Ted Cruz, I liked this, said that he wants to look again at the power of European Union to regulate AI. So if he's getting annoyed about it, it shows that it's having some really good effect in the US. So I think I love the AI Act. I think it's a brilliant piece of law. It's very well thought through. It's obviously highly complicated, but all I can say is that on our side, we're working for some of the biggest companies in the world who are global, who are taking it seriously. And I think the UK's position on this is quite interesting, because companies will take note of what's happening in the UK, but actually Europe is so much more powerful and influential. If we decide to diverge, we're still going to have Europe as the benchmark. So how powerful are we in our divergence? And is that going to prompt further innovation? I honestly don't think it will, because the kind of the base level that most companies globally are now taking, rightly, is the AI Act.
Kathy, if I come to you as an organisation that operates globally, of course, how impactful do you think the EU AI Act effect could be? And how are you managing the kind of somewhat kind of crowded conversation globally around AI governance at the moment? How does it feel from the kind of multinational organisation side of the house?
Yeah, we very much are a multinational company, and we do have to think about all of the different regulations, either actual or proposed or voluntary commitments. So, very much close to your hearts, I think. Heathrow Airport uses our agent force agents, and so we need to make sure that we are very much in compliance with GDPR. We've signed the voluntary EU AI Pact. We've signed a number of other voluntary commitments, and also have been very active, to the earlier point about Tokyo, participating in the Hiroshima AI process. So because we are a large company and we have a number of people with deep expertise in AI ethics and policy and regulations, we can be very active in these conversations. And I think we bring a different kind of perspective to these conversations, because we're not a consumer facing company. We're not B2C. We're enterprise CRM AI. We're a platform. We can't see our customers' data. We can't see their models. We don't use our customers' data to train our models. And so in many ways, it provides a different set of constraints on us that regulations do not. But we need to be able to give the tools to our customers that regardless of which region they're in, they can ensure that they are in compliance as well. So we have responsibilities internally with our employees, with regulators, and then with our customers to help them be successful. So it's a lot.
And it's navigating that landscape, which could potentially get even more complicated in 2025, right?
Yes, I think in the US, we very much have a patchwork quilt of approaches, because we don't have one federal set of regulations that cover all these different kinds of AI and applications of AI. So different states are very active in thinking about what are their priorities. And so my home state of California has been at the forefront. We've passed quite a few AI regulations this year that will take effect in January. And so it makes it challenging for companies to keep track of not just globally, what are all of the different regulations in different regions, but even just if you're just within the US, understanding what you have to comply with in California versus New York versus Illinois is a real challenge. So creating a harmonization across different policies is something I think everybody would benefit from, but it's a very hard thing to come to an agreement.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of bring Luciano into this, because we had a bit of a chat recently, Luciano, right, about what's happening in the US and the policy approach that's happening there, and you alluded to that in your start at what's happening at the state level related to AI, and the national states and legislatives making progress there. I'm now going to put you on a bit of the spot, apologies, because obviously we're now talking post the US election and with the results of the US election. I just wondered, do you see that approach in terms of, the states leading the way still being the way forward for the US around AI governance and regulation? Will states continue to lead, or do you think we might see a shift in the balance between the state and a federal approach? Well, if you got your crystal ball out, what would you sense is happening there?
Okay, where did I put the crystal ball? Let me find it. Well, I think that on a personal basis, I think we Europeans underestimate how big the F is in federal when it comes to the United States. It is hugely federal, meaning that the states really mind their own business, and they are proud, defensive in terms of their own regulations and in independence, so to speak, autonomy, to be more precise. So the state level legislation will continue. sometimes with friction with Washington, sometimes in the total indifference from Washington, because it's almost like a parallel world. Essentially, the state senators go their own way. So far, Connecticut, the state where I am, Yale, was going to be the first to pass its own AI Act legislation piece, sort of. It was actually, for accidental reasons, governor and everything else, it was Colorado which went first. So Colorado already has its own legislation. Connecticut is going to go next. The good news, but Kathy is completely right. I don't want to be the optimist in the room, not at all. It is a patchwork, it is fragmented. The good news is that they try to coordinate. So if you imagine this National Association of state-level senators meeting regularly, making sure that every piece of legislation is a bit of a photocopy insofar as they can. Having said that, then there are disagreements, there are different political orientations. Some states, for example, decide to upgrade, update, modify already, say, customer-related safety products legislation. They don't have an AI piece of legislation. Some others, Utah, for example, California, I've already mentioned Florida, Connecticut, they are leading. So we're going to see a bit of a fragmented world. And it's funny coming from Europe, how to see Europe trying to, from a fragmented world, trying to unify through decades of hard work, unifying piece of regulatory framework. We have one driving license throughout Europe versus the United States, which is unified on the facade, but then under it, they have one driving license per state. So you have to modify or update your state license if you move from Connecticut to California. So it's a bit of a strange context, but I don't want to take too much time. Let me just point out a couple of things quickly. One, I would not expect anything from Washington in terms of federal legislation here. It didn't happen with Biden. It's not going to happen with Trump. I mean, this is not. I mean, happy to be proved wrong when we see each other again in a year's time. But it would be astonishing if anything were to come from the very partisan and disinterested Washington. At the same time, Biden executive order will be put in the trash. At least Trump promised to do that. So of the 4 possible ways of regulating the AI environment, Washington, none. Biden executive order will go state level, yes, a lot, and they will keep going. There's a 4th, which is a bit of a random variable and quite dangerous, especially for companies, which is any regulation by enforcement. That happens when agencies decide that there is a vacuum, that there's pressure to do something about their vacuum of rules, and they pick up something that is vaguely related and hammer whatever companies are there to send a signal. We have seen this with the cryptocurrencies. The SEC did that precisely. It is a well-known phenomenon. It is growing for reasons that are too long to explain today. I mean, boring stuff anyway, Chevron and everything else with the Supreme Court. But essentially, agencies are potentially likely to move forward if there is pressure there. That is a nightmare for any company because it's a curveball.
Oh, thank you, Luciano. Things to watch out for.
Isn't there one other interesting aspect to this, which is the role of Elon Musk, who signed the letter, 30,000 people requesting an ethical pause on AI, and actually supported the California legislation, which didn't pass. So could this be the first way in which Trump and Elon Musk fall out? Because actually, Musk is pro-legislation, Trump looking to be kind of anti it, and I think that could be a really interesting dynamic to see play out.
Well, let's come back next year, Jonathan, and see what's happened there. Guy, did you want to come in?
No.
So we talked a lot about policy and governance, and obviously really, really hot topic that we'll have to continue to talk about in the next 12 months. But Guy, I wanted to bring us back to that. How do we get this in the public square, right? The public debate. Because we're going to see, as Kathy was saying, with a genetic AI, we're going to see continued development. I'm sure Kathy would agree, at pace as well in terms of technological developments. So advances aren't slowing down. How do we ensure that we can do this that's in the public interest? Martin Tisney was talking about the public interest before. And what role do bodies like yours, like the Ada Lovelace Institute, have? What role can you play in bridging that gap, but also getting it into that public square? What do you think we're missing that we need? Because we've talked a lot over the years of public engagement is really, really important. But it's an easy thing to say, but it's also a hard thing to get right?
So I've got a couple of thoughts. Firstly, I think we do need to explore what public interest AI means.
Yeah.
That's a very wonky answer, so I won't stay there for too long. Martin Tisney has offered us a version of that. I think we need to, as a civil society sector, maybe just kind of get our houses in order and start telling similar stories, frankly.
So harmonisation there as well, you think?
Possibly, actually. Like, I might disagree or agree with it, but I think the notion that is important for AI to be delivered in the public interest over the course of history is more important than whether your exact formulation of public interest is the same as mine.
Yeah.
I think there is something about platforming people's voices. We have a lot of work on what people want from AI, and we share this. And I have many wonky answers here, but fundamentally, we need to make people care about this. And that, for me, is I can bring people with my value system along with me. So there are people that already are sold. They're not the people that we need to win the argument with. I was very interested that you mentioned the threat to labour as an existential threat, because it is.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But it's not what people mean when they talk about existential threat in this. So we have a lot of very, very safe people who feel very safe, that are driving the conversation in one direction around AGI or life and limb risks that aren't real. They're not here yet, right? Whereas we actually have some real existential risks, like labour, like, you get all of your benefits taken away from you. Like, there are so many real current risks. And it's not really for an independent research organisation to run screaming into the press, but it might be for someone to. There's a real question to me of how do we make this feel real to someone that's in a position of power, probably doesn't have many of the kind of common determinants of kind of disadvantage, that actually these are really consequential questions that will have an impact on their life chances, their children's life chances, and the society they'll see.
And if people start to lose their jobs, which I think will happen quite soon because they're replaced by a robot, they will start to ask questions quite quickly of government, of companies. I mean, the TUC is really interesting on this. It talks extensively around, and obviously has very good examples of how every day people are, for example, being sacked by a machine because of incorrect expense claims, when actually those incorrect expense claims were never checked by a person. They were. So, this idea that this is somehow in the future is very close to people's lives. I think the other kind of sobering story from history that we can take from this is what happened when we started to unleash technology onto our children. And obviously the last 10 years has been a big lesson we need to learn from. Similarly, if we're going to expose our children to AI, for example, in schools and in the education system, then we need to be very conscious of the positives, but also the significant negatives of that. And the government needs to have answers. So, for example, is it appropriate that a 10-year-old child should be able to write an essay on ChatGPT and hand it in at school? Is that going to be good for their brain? Is it going to be good for their cognitive ability, their ability to construct an argument? Again, I'm seeing a vacuum in government for answers for these really important questions, and they are existential, because if we bring up a generation of children who can't read and write properly because a machine has done it for them, then that's an issue for all of us.
So it feels a little bit like, Felicity, that we've got, and perhaps this is the dynamic that we've had for a while, really big existential questions, future, kind of how do we get this right? But then there's the day-to-day application, the day-to-day deployment, diffusion, where we're using AI technologies, and what that means from a governance point of view, what that means from a people point of view. Yeah. And I suppose my question to you is kind of, do we have what we need to navigate this, and particularly navigate the conversation in the next 12 months? But to reflect on what Jonathan and others have said, that there's two conversations going on here.
Yeah, I think there are two conversations. I think it's actually really relevant when it comes to public engagement in particular, because I think that there's two really important questions here. One is, as a society, what on earth do we actually want from this technology? Like, what is our positive vision for for AI and the things that it's going to deliver for that. And I think that is a question for, not for me because I'm a civil servant, but for political leaders and for civil society and for others to answer. And I think it is really important that we do have a vision of what this technology is here to deliver for us. But then I think that there is the day-to-day question about, okay, well, we've said we were going to use this technology in this context. Is this appropriate? Are people comfortable with it? And education is a really interesting example. So Responsible Technology Adoption Unit has a dedicated public attitudes and public engagement team. And actually we've been specifically doing some work with the Department for Education on this question about how you might use AI in educational context. And we made particular efforts to firstly engage a diverse group of people, but to engage parents, to engage pupils, to engage teachers, to bring them together in this conversation, to do this deliberatively, to make sure that they have the information to make the decisions about how these technologies are used. So yes, it's a small group, but actually we've got some really interesting sort of conclusions from it, and people in all of those three groups sort of coalesced around, well, actually we do feel quite comfortable with teachers having access to AI tools to help them support pupils, but feel much less comfortable than with pupils sort of using these tools and interacting directly with them in school. And I think that kind of work is then really helpful for how we set our kind of long-term policy. So I think building public engagement into the way we do things as government, but also, you know, if businesses are thinking about this, it's your public and your customers and the acceptability of the products that you're developing. I think it's worth considering that. I think it's worth considering that too. And then I think the other issue, sort of beyond the kind of public acceptability, and is it okay from that perspective? I think one thing that businesses really need to be mindful of is like whether these tools actually work in your context. I think that, you know, there's a lot of excitement and there are a lot of really brilliant use cases for AI, but it doesn't work in all contexts. It's not always going to be the right tool for you. And really making sure that we are building this sort of assurance ecosystem that says, yes, that helps businesses know, yes, this tool is robust. Yes, this tool has adequately, or the governance around this tool has adequately sort of addressed the risks associated with you adopting it. These are the kind of steps that you're going to have to take. We have to start building out this assurance landscape now, and for me, that's, you know, that will be a big focus of my team over the coming year, is how we build out this assurance landscape and really raise awareness of the risks associated with AI, but also how you can start addressing that.
Just one other point on that. Obviously, going back to the AI Act, the first deadline, 2nd of February 25, AI literacy. So to be positive about that, again, lots of the businesses that we're working with are working very hard now between now and February to do a lot of training about the benefits of AI, but also the risks within their organisation. So again, law does have a really important part to play here to kind of drive awareness raising and good behaviour, because I think from a civil society perspective, yes, we can have good conversations, but actually the law needs to back that up.
Yeah. So 2025, the year of AI assurance, is what you're saying, Felicity?
I hope so, and that will start in January with all of the techUK members responding to our consultation on AI management essentials.
There you go.
The minister did talk about this a bit earlier today, so I guess to kind of bring it back to the conversation that we started earlier in the day. I think it's really important that government plays a leadership role here. We know that developing the AI assurance market is something that we can help with, and so in setting out AI management essentials, which is our sort of baseline self-assessment tool for businesses who are using AI, we really want to sort of help businesses sort of get to grips with something that is informed by the EU AI Act, it is informed by NIST approaches, and indeed the UK's own approach. So we're setting out a baseline. We'll be building a platform of wider tools for businesses to access on AI assurance. We really do want to hear from the business community, though, because we have to make sure that works. And thank you to you and colleagues at techUK for the engagement already in developing that. This is absolutely something that business and government and civil society as well should all be doing hand in glove together. And I suppose if my theme 1 for 2025 is assurance, my theme 2 should absolutely be collaboration. We do need to do this hand in glove.
So we're going to very, very quickly run out of time, but I just wanted to end. Kathy, can I come to you to perhaps, we always need more time, so please come back and see us another time. But just wanted to end on in terms of, from a business perspective and from an industry perspective, what do you think that businesses should be their top priority, they should be focusing on, and what are you focusing on in 2025? What does the next 12 months hold for you, and what should be on the top of people's lists, if that makes sense?
Well, organizations really need to understand what the high risk, high impact use cases are, and to the point that was made earlier, what kind of AI, if any at all, is appropriate for each use case. How do we keep humans at the helm, in control of the technology? How do we choose what tasks are appropriate to fully automate? And which are the things that we need to continue to maintain oversight of? We need to make sure that our data house is in order.
Yep.
You can't have AI ethics without data ethics. And so we need to continue to elevate conversations about data privacy, data handling, control, transparency. So as I believe we're going to see just more and more companies moving from predictive to generative to agentic AI, the importance of that transparency, that accuracy, that level of control and keeping humans at the helm just continues to get more and more important over time.
Thank you, Kathy, and great prompts for us all, from all of you, to where we should be focusing and where we should be looking next year. And perhaps this becomes our first panel of next year of did this all come to fruition? So I'm really sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. To Luciano and to Kathy, thank you for joining us virtually. Have a great rest of your day, and come and see us in real life next time. So thank you so much. And to Jonathan and to Gaia and to Felicity, can we thank them for a brilliant conversation?